Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in the second part of our series of definitions, the ball versus a ball. My name is Jason Funderburg. I'm joined by the entire tournament department. Chris Roselle and Kirby Martin are going to be helping answer some questions in the questions area, and Neil Gilman's going to be presenting today. Before I kick it over to Neil, I want to remind everyone that today's webinar is being recorded and is available at gapgolf.org/gap-webinars. Also want to encourage any and all questions. If you have a question, just throw them our way in the questions portion of your window pane, and we will do our best to answer them. If we don't answer them in the presentation today, we will answer them offline later. So without further ado, Neil, we ready to get it started here?
All right, so Neil's having some technical difficulties getting back into the presentation, so that leaves me and Chris to go through this. I didn't honestly prepare myself to be the last minute speaker here, but I think if Chris and I kind of tag team this, we should be okay to go. Chris, you still with me?
That works for me. Yeah, that works for me, Kirby.
Okay. And if Neil gets back on, we'll turn the mic over to Neil. So starting off with the term drop. A drop is to hold the ball and let it go so that it falls through the air with the intent for the ball to be in play. Go ahead and hit your key there, Chris. If the player lets go of a ball without intending it to be in play, the ball has not been dropped and it's not in play. So imagine we're holding the ball and we're getting ready to maybe do a drop, and suddenly it falls from our hand. That's not a drop. We have to have that intent to put it back in play, and in order for us to go through the dropping, actually have a drop. Each relief rule identifies a specific area where the ball must be dropped and come to rest. So in the top picture here, we have a gal who's hit it into a penalty area, and she's proceeding under the back on the line procedure for a penalty area. She's chosen a spot there on that line, and her area that is developed by that spot on the line is 1 club length in either direction, no closer to the hole. So she needs to drop it in that specific relief area. In the bottom picture, we have a player taking relief from an immovable obstruction, and that rule requires that we go to the nearest point of relief, complete relief, and you can see he's put a T in the ground there for where that would be, no closer to the hole. And again, that relief area is 1 club length in any direction, no closer to the hole, and he drops it in that relief area.
And Kirby, one thing to keep in mind, just looking at both of these pictures, and I'm not sure if there's another slide that shows this later on, you don't have to stand in the relief area while you drop your ball in the relief area. The ball just has to be dropped and come to rest in the relief area, and obviously you have to drop it in the proper fashion, but you don't have to stand in the relief area while you're dropping.
Yeah, the pictures there could be a little misleading.
Mm-hmm.
And taking relief, the player, I'm sorry, is somebody talking?
Yep, looks like Neil is back in here. Neil, is your mic working now?
Yeah, Jason, I'm back here, and I think we're good to go.
Perfect.
So Neil, we were just working through drop here. We've gotten to the point where the player, maybe 2 or 3 slides in here, and now the player is taking relief.
Yeah. Well, Chris, if you don't mind continuing to share that screen, it will help me out here. So yeah, I jumped in there when Chris and Kirby were talking about the relief area and not having to stand in there when taking your drop. So when you're taking your relief, the player must let go of the ball from a location at knee height. I think pretty famously, we've all seen Ricky Fowler drop it in his unique fashion from last year's Waste Management. It was not bending over at knee height, but the ball was dropped at knee height. So it just needs to be dropped from knee height. The ball just needs to fall straight down without the player throwing, spinning, or rolling, or using any other motion that might affect where the ball will come to rest. In the previous edition of the rules, that was known as cannot influence the ball as it's falling. And I think one thing that is important is that the ball must not touch any part of the player's body or equipment before it hits the ground. And why that's underlined there is that if the ball were to strike the player or the equipment after it strikes the ground and it still comes to rest within the relief area, it's going to be okay. But if it strikes the player or equipment before it hits the ground, then it's going to require us to drop that ball again. So we'll jump into what the relief area is. And the relief area is the area where the player must drop a ball when taking relief under a rule. In our examples over here, you see two relief areas for two different situations. In our top example, you see a player dropping from what is presumed a yellow penalty area, and she is taking a back on the line relief or the flag line relief. And our our example below is our lateral relief from a presumed red penalty area where her relief area is a bit different. So each relief rule requires the player to use that specific relief area whose size and locations are based on these three factors. So this is where the definitions and the rules of golf have internal definitions. And this is one of those occasions. So reference point, if you can see in that top example, the reference point is the point from which the size of the relief area is measured. As denoted here by our X's, that's our reference point. We're going to determine the size of that relief. So the size of the relief area is measured from that reference point, and the relief area is 1 or 2 club lengths. A good rule of thumb, something that I always think about when taking relief or helping a player take relief, is if it's free relief, you're going to get 1. You're always getting 1 club length for free, and if you're going to pay by a penalty of a stroke, you're going to get that second club length. But there are some limits when it comes to determining that relief area. So the location of the relief area may be limited in 1 or more ways, so that, for example, it is only in the defined areas of the course. So it might only be in the general area, and you might not be able to drop in a bunker or a penalty area. This is specific to certain rules. There are occasions where you might have to drop in a bunker or you might have to drop in a penalty area. But it cannot be nearer the hole than the reference point, and it must be outside the penalty area or a bunker from which relief is being taken. And as well as it must be where no interference from the condition which relief is being taken. What that is saying is if you're taking an immovable obstruction relief, you got to clear that interference from which you are taking. So you must get complete relief from that immovable obstruction. So when we're taking our relief area or we're gathering our relief area, you're going to use club lengths, which is another definition we'll talk about after this slide, to determine the size of that relief area. The player may measure directly across a ditch, hole, or similar thing, and directly across or through an object, such as a tree, fence, wall, tunnel, drain, or sprinkler head. I've seen this on a test question. I haven't had a player ever ask me but you cannot measure through a hill. Those inches that you might gain by measuring through a hill are not taken into effect. The topography of the course is measured with those club lengths. And just like I said in that previous comment, it's not measured through the ground, but is not measured that naturally slopes up and down. And this, just a little note here about committee procedures, and a question you might get, and you often see when you're playing on a golf course that has a penalty area. The committee may choose to allow or require the player to use a dropping zone as a relief area when taking certain relief. So a lot of times you'll see that as an additional option to your other relief options for penalty area relief or other areas of relief. Jason, I think this is where I actually had my first question slide, if we want to keep moving or we want to answer a few questions.
We're light on questions right now, so if we want to just keep it moving, I think that would be best.
Great. So a club length is the length of the longest club of the 14 or fewer clubs the player has during the round. One caveat to this is that a club length, the longest club in your bag or that you selected for the round cannot be your putter. So as this example points out, that most often than not, it is your driver that is typically the longest club in your bag. So that you are entitled to measuring your club lengths via that length of the driver or the longest club in your bag other than a putter. One note, if you are taking relief, you're entitled to that relief of the longest club in your bag. If you've got a wedge and you're just measuring with your wedge to get clear of an obstruction, you still have all the room that your driver would have given you as well. And just as an example there, if the driver is 43 inches, the club length is 43 inches for that round, just kind of explaining what we mean by you're entitled to all of the length of the driver when you're taking relief. Club lengths are used in defining the player's teeing area for each hole. As you know, the teeing area stretches 2 club lengths from the tee markers, as well as in determining the size of the player's relief area when taking relief under a rule. So we'll talk about wrong place here. A wrong place is any place on the golf course other than where the player's ball is required, or the player is required or allowed to play his or her ball under the rules. So some examples of playing from a wrong place, and our illustrations do so by showing this, is after replacing on a wrong spot. So we talked about it a little bit yesterday if you joined us. Replacing that ball in a wrong spot is going to have us playing from a wrong place, or without replacing it when required under the rules. So in our middle picture there, this player has accidentally moved her ball or moved his ball and played it from the new spot as opposed to where the ball should have been replaced. They're going to get a penalty for playing from the wrong place. And in our third example, this player was taking relief. The ball came to rest outside of the relief area and then subsequently played. She has played from a wrong place. So when you're playing a ball from outside the teeing area in starting play of a hole or trying to correct a mistake, you're not actually playing from a wrong place. You haven't started that hole. So if you tee the ball up in front of the tee markers, 2 feet, 3 feet, whatever it might be in front of the tee markers, you haven't played from the wrong place. You technically haven't played. So if you read into Rule 6.1b, starting the play of the hole, ball must be played from inside the teeing area. And as that illustration shows down there below, our teeing area is defined once again by club lengths in that rectangular box down there. So we jump into what a serious breach is, and this is something that only occurs in stroke play. So in stroke play, when a player playing from a wrong place could give a player a significant advantage compared to the stroke being made from the right place. In making this comparison to decide if there is a serious breach, the factors to be taken into account include a various few things. For one, the difficulty of the stroke, the distance of the ball from the hole, the effect of the obstacles in the line of play, and the conditions affecting the stroke. So one common example when you see this is a player is 130 yards away from the green. There's a tree that interferes with that player's shot. The player strikes his ball, hits the tree, but carries the penalty area, bounces back into the water. Then the player drops on the other side of the penalty area. That's a situation that likely would require the player to play. Had he played and holed out, it would likely be a serious breach and would possibly result in a penalty for that player. The concept of serious breach does not apply in match play because a player loses a hole if he or she plays from a wrong place. So we hear a lot of times that the penalty is too short, or the general penalty, in match play is a loss of hole penalty. Jason, I think I had a question slide after that. If you've got something that, if you've got any questions.
Yep, got one here. When taking a drop in the relief area and the ball hits the player inadvertently moves the ball after it was at rest, does the player take a new drop?
You may have to repeat that back to me just because I want to make sure I got it right, but I believe the player has dropped the ball and then the ball has struck the ground, then accidentally struck the player, and then it's come to rest inside the relief area.
Yeah, it's worded a little bit iffy here, but yeah, that is my understanding of this question.
Okay, well, if in that example, if the ball strikes the ground, then strikes the player, there's not going to be any penalty. It's not going to be a redrop. We're going to play it so long as that ball has come to rest within that relief area, and it's done so accidentally when it strikes the player.
Now, to piggyback off that, what if the ball hits the player inadvertently when dropping before it hits the ground?
Yeah, so if the player drops the ball and then by some chance it hits the player's foot, that's not considered dropping in the right way. So we're actually going to re-drop the ball. We're going to drop it and make sure it's done in the right way without striking anything before it hits the ground first.
Perfect. That's all I got for now, so I think we're good to keep moving.
Great. So the next thing here is we're going to talk about stroke and distance. And the stroke and distance is a procedure and penalty when the player takes relief under some rules. And we talk about rules 17, 18, or 19 by playing a ball where the previous stroke was made. And we'll talk about each of these rules here and what that stroke and distance is. So again, we talk about them. Rule 17 being penalty areas, 18 just talking about general stroke and distance relief, and talking about unplayable ball. The player always has the option to take stroke and distance relief. If they want to play from the penalty area, they're entitled to do so. There is an additional option under penalty areas to play as well as from the last place where you played safely from the general area, but I encourage you to read more into Rule 17 to fully understand that one. So the term stroke and distance means that the player both gets one penalty stroke, and loses the benefit of distance towards the hole from the spot where the previous stroke was made. So it's very commonly when a ball is hit out of bounds, you're enacting stroke and distance relief by coming back to where the previous stroke was made before the ball went out of bounds. And one more concept here that we'll get under our belts here is a provisional ball, which is another ball played in case the ball just played by the player may be out of bounds or lost outside of a penalty area. Obviously, two concepts there. We just talked about the one with the ball being out of bounds. You can play that provisional ball. You're proceeding under stroke and distance if that ball is in fact out of bounds. And then a ball that is lost outside of a penalty area. If your ball is in a penalty area, you're not going to be proceeding under provisional ball. You're going to take a different relief procedure. But if your ball is lost outside in a heavily roughed area or fescue, you're going to be able to take provisional ball. You play that provisional ball, and that could become your ball in play.
Hey, Neil.
Hey.
Hey, Neil.
Yeah, Kirby.
Could you just go over what happens if a player plays a provisional ball from the teeing ground when it may be lost in the penalty area?
Yeah, so if a player plays a ball and that ball is headed into the penalty area and then is known to be in that penalty, or is known and virtually certain to be in that penalty area, once that player puts that provisional ball in play, they've actually already proceeded under stroke and distance. So that next ball becomes the ball in play when played. However, if a ball is played in a heavily wooded area and there is the player is not known or virtually certain that that ball has entered that penalty area or is lost in that penalty area, they may proceed with the provisional ball without that ball becoming the ball in play at that moment. Just following through here, a provisional ball is not a player's ball in play unless it becomes a ball in play under the Rule 18.3c. And just furthering that, it's likely that a ball wouldn't come into play until the 3-minute search time is up, or your provisional ball has been played at a spot closer to the hole than where your original ball was likely to be. All right, Jason, I think that's the last slide before we terminate this one. Do we have any additional questions?
None so far, but I'll give everybody a couple reminders before we do, see if anything flows in. Just a reminder, everybody, that today's webinar is recorded. Will be presented on gapgolf.org/gap-webinars. I'd also encourage everyone to sign up for tomorrow's webinar. It's going to be run by, I believe, Chris Roselle. And hopefully with less technical issues. Appreciate everyone sticking with us through those. Looks like we're late on questions.
Jason, I think this is our last one.
Oh, well, my mistake. Well, then in that case, keep an eye out for any announcements on more webinars coming up, as I'm sure we're going to look to expand those. Got a quick question here for you, Neil. Is a provisional still need to be announced?
Yes. So you still need to announce your provisional ball to your competitors.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Appreciate you sticking through the technical issues, and appreciate Neil for rallying there and doing a great job. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you all next time.